Good morning, everybody. My name is Corey Honey. I am Sheriff of Butte County, and welcome to our press briefing this morning. Today, I want to talk with you a little bit about what has been going on with regard to our evacuation warning that was lifted on Wednesday, March 22nd, and then tell you a little bit about our plan that we put in place with regard to dealing with potential evacuations in the future and how people can get information. So on Wednesday, March 22nd, I lifted the evacuation warning and advisories for Butte County residents previously affected by the February 12th Oroville Dam spillway emergency evacuations. I feel satisfied with the progress made in reinforcing the primary spillway, emergency spillway, and returning the Hyatt Powerhouse to an operational state, as well as successful efforts by the Department of Water Resources to lower the lake level enough to buffer future storms. In the coming few months, work will continue to manage the spring runoff inflows to the reservoir. That said, I want people to be clear about this. Just because I've lifted the warning doesn't mean that we're out of this crisis. This crisis will continue until all facilities related to the Oroville Dam are completely fixed and fully operational. I want people to continue to pay attention to what's going on, and I want them to be prepared to evacuate if that becomes necessary in the future, if there is a risk that rises to that level. Now, in an effort to do that, keep people informed about what's going on, let them know what our plans are, we're holding community meetings for residents in southern Butte County who live in the in the evacuation zones. There are 11 zones which cover cities of Oroville, Gridley, Biggs, and the surrounding unincorporated communities within the area, ranging from the Oroville Dam south to the Butte County line on both sides of the Feather River. Each evacuation zone includes a recommended evacuation route, public assembly points, and an evacuation center. We've already held 2 meetings. The first one was in Gridley. The second one was last week in Oroville. The meetings were very well attended. We provided the attendees with information about our evacuation plan, and we are scheduled to have 2 more meetings taking place this week for the residents of Palermo, which will cover zones 3, 4, and 10. That meeting is taking place Wednesday, March 22nd at 6 p.m. At the Palermo School Gymnasium. That is located at 7350 Bulldog Way in Palermo. The last meeting that we have scheduled will take place this Thursday, March 30th, for the residents of Thermalito, which covers Zone 2. That meeting is at 6 p.m. at the Nelson Avenue School, which is located at 2255 6th Street in Oroville. If there are needs for additional meetings beyond that, we will certainly hold them. And I've been contacted by a number of community groups who I've spoken to about the possibility of holding meetings specifically for those groups. I also want to encourage Butte County residents who may not be able to attend the meetings to visit buttecounty.net/OEM. That stands for Office of Emergency Management. There they can view the flood evacuation maps. They can go to an interactive map, enter their address, and determine which zone, if any, they are in. There's also information about emergency preparedness on that site, and they can sign up for the emergency mass notification system that would allow us to alert them in the event that there was a need to evacuate, or if we reissued the evacuation warning. If you have any difficulties signing up for the emergency mass notification system, I want you to email infosheriff@buttecounty.net. Provide my staff with your name, address, and telephone number, and we will work to get you signed up and deal with any difficulties that you might be having. You can also learn about the SNAP program, which stands for Special Needs Assistance Program, on that website. And so if you are a person with a disability or you know someone with a disability who might have a difficult time evacuating, please sign up for that program as well so that first responders will know where you're at and be able to send help to help you evacuate in the need that arises. At this point, I'm going to turn the conference over to Acting Director Bill Croyle, and he'll update you on what's going on with the spillway.
Thank you, Sheriff. Mary, can you close the doors over there? Thank you. So again, Bill Croyle with the Department of Water Resources. Thank you again for coming to our press briefing today. We're at another step in our process that I want to provide a lot of information. So we have a lot to cover. Hopefully I'm going to answer a few questions before they're asked, but then we'll take questions after we talk to some of our key partners, being Caltrans and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. First, I want to also, again, express our appreciation for the communities, City of Oroville, Butte County, our downstream neighbors that have been working with us through this process, staying informed, participating in the outreach activities that the sheriff is conducting with regard to the evacuation mapping. You know, I think that goes to kind of we are adapting to the lessons learned on the fly here, which is very quick. And so being engaged and asking those questions and participating in these kinds of events and activities is super important for all of us to learn from what has happened here in Oroville and take that for in the end, we'll have a safer dam, safer communities, and be more prepared for almost any emergency that might come our way. So first I'm going to start off with the numbers. The current lake elevation as of about an hour ago is 836.8, a little less than that. Our inflow, which fluctuates quite a bit during this time of year because of the diurnal effects of day and night. Right now we're looking at about 23,000 CFS coming into the lake. The spillway flow is at 40,000 CFS. The Hyatt power plant is currently at 0 CFS, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. Our tail race elevation is 232.8 feet, so it's dropped a little bit here in the last day or so. And our total river flow down the Feather River is still at 40,000 CFS. So I want to talk, first we'll talk weather, then we'll dive into some of the activities that are going on today. So again, we have some additional beautiful weather scheduled for Butte County here in the coming days. We do anticipate a little bit of weather up canyon on Thursday and Friday, not a lot. The key there being snow levels down around 4,500 or so. So it's pretty cool here this morning, and so it sounds like even though it'll be warm during the day, it sounds like later in the week it'll get a little cooler. And then looking out 10 days in our Feather River process, we have a small weather event that's forecasted. Again, starting on April 4th through the 6th or 7th. Looking at average for this time of year, in the past weeks, we've been looking at 200, 180, 150% of average for these different sets of dates. So the forecast, again, for the Feather River Basin for the next 10 days is looking at 63%. So we like that. I think we have plenty of water and snow in the watershed. However, we are looking at setting in Northern California where just a few inches of rain in this water year to exceed the second wettest year on record. That goes back over 100 years. We're not quite there yet. We don't need too much more rain, but I would anticipate, given our weather patterns that we've had here in the last number of months, that and our water year goes through October 1st, and so we have plenty of time to kind of make that, break that second wettest year on record, if not the wettest year on record. The inflows that we are forecasting out 6 or 7 days are going to range between, on average for the day, We'll see some decreases here with this weather that we're having in the cooler weather, Upper Canyon down to about 17,000, but then increase over the next week or so, primarily due to snow melt, but then also a little bit because this incoming weather, somewhere around 27,000 cubic feet per second. We will see higher flows during parts of the days and then lower flows. Especially there's a lot of other smaller reservoirs upstream. We have other reservoirs that are now spilling. Lake Davis, I think, was in the paper. Frenchman, which we have a drone video posted up. So this is the time of year with the kind of snowpack and weather we've had. We're going to see those kinds of spills, and those are being factored into the inflows and then resulting operations here at Oroville Dam. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on today with the main spillway. First of all, the flow was turned back on the spillway on March 17th. We started out at 50,000 CFS and then dropped back to 40,000 for a couple different reasons to make sure that we minimize erosion within the channel that's to the south side of what's left of the spillway, and then our backwater concerns on the Hyatt Powerhouse. So during that time, we started the Hyatt Powerhouse at full operations, and we over time, because of the backwater effect, started to back off on those releases to make sure that we're protecting that powerhouse and through that. And so just a day ago or so, we actually went to zero flow, and so that we could do some preventative maintenance, get that plant ready to go to full operation here, and to give some of the water that's backed up on that plant to get out of the way so we can conduct our activities later this afternoon. So we're going to start reducing the flow from 40,000 to zero starting at noon today. So the process to step down has been revised and tweaked. Lots of consultation with our downstream water agencies, the Flood Operations Center, local levee maintaining agencies, our fish resource agencies, to make sure that all of the concerns that everyone might have are factored into our revised plan. Again, this will take place for about 6 hours, and as we step in here in a couple hours, or about 4 or 5 hours, we'll see Hyatt Power Plant come back up to full operation. We will continue to manage our flows during different time steps. So about sometime on Wednesday morning, at least the plan is to be at about 13,000 more or less in the Feather River downstream. Again, that's Wednesday morning. So if there's questions regarding the step down, we can kind of get into that. But again, our step today, as we start from 40,000, we'll go to 35,000, hold for 2 hours. Step again down to 30,000, hold for 2 hours, and then we'll quickly step down to zero from that. At the same time, once we get to 30 and watch the step over 45 minutes down to zero, we'll be pulling up both the Hyatt Powerhouse and making additional releases from the Thermalito Afterbay. It's a fairly complicated process. Fortunately, we have a lot of different pools of water that we can draw from, and so that's what we have. Part of our emergency response team is spread throughout the region so that we can watch, turn those dials, give those monitoring, and making sure the system is acting as we've planned. So let's talk a little bit about the reservoir. So once we go through this process, again, then we'll be limited to the operation of the Hyatt Powerhouse. So right now we have 5 turbines at our disposal. Again, we'll maximize those at 12,900 like we did for quite a while. But we also have some other things going on. We want to make sure that we're operating that plant for maximum efficiency, maintenance, et cetera, because we want that plant to work hard all summer. So we will, over the next number of weeks, making sure that we're doing that maintenance. And so we may do adjustments for either plant reasons or for the backwater concerns. Again, as we come off the spillway, we should see far less concern with the backwater, and we'll see how that works here in the next 3 or 4 days. While we're off of zero Q or zero flow off that spillway, there's a number of planned activities, many of which you've already seen, and so we're going to get back on the major activity being removal of the dredge material. that's down in the diversion pool, rebuilding some of the roads to access that area. So especially the area on the south that eroded away with this high flow event, we're going to rebuild that access road so we can have the dredge to remove dredge material going both ways to the north and to the south. We'll do a little bit more armoring at the base of the spillway again for the help help facilitate that dredging and removal of that material to those spoil sites. We're going to jump as soon as it's safe, which will go through a process here later today and tomorrow to tag out the gates, make sure when it's safe and get it cleared to get back in the emergency spillway. We'll do what we did last time, which is inspect 100% of that upper spillway and start any repairs that might be needed. So quite a bit of work has been done. So, but again, they'll go back in, check for any additional work, any spalling, anything that may have happened. They'll jump on that. That includes any of the shotcrete at the very end that we put in, off the very end of the spillway and underneath. They'll go and look at that, inspect how that held up. And then if there's things that they feel like they want to do or need to do, then they'll go ahead and plan that out for this next week. We're going to, again, go back to sealing any and all joints. Any repairs where we have spalling, or that's where some of the concrete pieces come up because of the water flowing off the top of the deck. I said the additional dredging, so right now we're sitting still at about 1.26 million cubic yards of material. Again, the number of 1.7 million cubic yards total still stands. When we pull this down, we'll reassess to see how much additional material that we may have to add on to that. We'll also be working on stabilizing some of the slopes to make it safer to work in and around these areas, whether it's on the north side or the south side of the spillway. Some of that's for our emergency response teams to monitor the stability of the spillway, get ready for the next spill that we will have, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And the idea there is, again, to learn more about this area and better protect our people and our equipment that are moving around this area. Some of that will also help us have a better idea how we access the area for the ultimate recovery of this spillway, the emergency recovery efforts planned later this year. One of the key things that we're working with our regulatory partners, the emergency response team, the recovery team, and our independent board is assessing the geology in and around the spillway and the emergency spillway. So we have a number of drill rigs that have mobilized on site. And so some of those rigs now are drilling holes, collecting that geologic information. So one of the things that we're continuing to evaluate is how many holes that we want to put in the spillway itself. And so that's part of our discussion here today in the coming days. So as we put that drilling equipment back in the spillway, then we can get on with some of that geologic assessments. And that's obviously important for gathering information to validate the preliminary designs that are being developed right now with this multi-agency regulatory and our independent board process. I talked a little bit about the Hyatt Powerhouse. Again, we went down to zero flow. We'll bring that back up. Hopefully we'll bring it up to 12.9, which is our plan. That should resume shortly, or thereabouts 4 o'clock today, and then it'll spin back up over time. And then one of our key actions there is to monitor the backwater effect. So as we come off of 40,000, we expect the water on the back, pressing back on that Hyatt Powerhouse to be reduced, and then that allows us to bring the plant back into full operation. The emergency spillway work should be done. I think I heard there was like one concrete truck still to do or something like that, but very close. So that's good. And so then the recovery team will be back in that area assessing the lay of the land, the geologic structure, and then looking at those alternatives to bring that spillway back into a design criteria that they're still talking about. A little bit on recovery. And so I've stated before, as soon as an emergency incident starts, the emergency managers need to start the recovery activity. And so that started about the same time this event happened, starting back on February 7th. So they're becoming more active. Some of the trailers showing up on this field office site or for those recovery teams to come together, transition from response into recovery. We're collecting that information. As I indicated last time, there's a number of activities that are being planned, and so those activities are being implemented now. One of which, as I understand this morning, the contract was let for the construction, alignment, improvements for the Burma Road. Again, that's going to be a major access point for a lot of the construction equipment needed to access the spillway from the north. There's a rock crusher on site. We talked a little bit about that. Again, the rock crusher is going through the process of crushing rock that is available here on site and testing it so that we can see if it meets the specs for the ultimate reconstruction of the spillway. There's a lot of fencing for public safety that's going in because there's a number of areas that we're concerned about with regard to public access and making sure that we're working within the boundaries of our project. There's a concrete batch plant that's being in the process of being acquired, again, to mobilize that equipment. Even though we don't have the design or done and approved, there's a number of things that we need to do now to make sure we're prepared for when it is time to start the physical reconstruction. All the staging's done, materials are on site, the coordination between a lot of different entities and contractors needs to take place. We will, if I have anything to do about it, we'll have a spillway to use by November 1st. Whether that's a permanent or temporary structure is yet to be decided. Part of that comes back to the alternatives that are being vetted out through not only the department, but our regulatory agencies, our independent board of consultants, and ultimately we're briefing the governor, the water contractors, et cetera, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to implement a corrective action before wet season next year. We'll know more about that actually fairly quickly. Maybe not the complete design, but we expect to have a 60% design vetted through the process here later this week or very early next week. And so that'll be one of the things that we talk about next time we get together, is what that design looks like and what the contingency plans are for if a particular design is executed and we run into a roadblock, is what are those other things that we're going to do to ensure that we have a safe and usable spillway, an emergency spillway for this next flood season. At this point, before we get into questions, I want to invite our Caltrans and California Department of Fish and Wildlife partners up. So we'll start with Gilbert.
Good morning. My name is Gilbert Mose-Chan. I'm with Caltrans, and just wanted to, first of all, thank the Department of Water Resources and Butte County for their cooperation and the work that we were involved in. Especially want to thank the people of Oroville and Butte County for their patience during the construction of the road that we've been involved and with the inconvenience with the road closures. So we really appreciate their patience and understanding during this construction work. Caltrans, our primary role in this is rebuilding Canyon Drive, which is the designated haul route for the large heavy equipment and materials. And Caltrans recommended to the county as well as the Department of Water Resources a construction design, basically a highway design for a county road. So we've been involved with that. We started February 28th, and it's a 1.3 mile stretch of local road that connects from the spillway down to State Highway 162. So we've been involved in rebuilding that, and work has been progressing really well. We've got one final layer of asphalt, some work on the shoulders and striping, and some other small final work with the driveways, and we should be finished within 2 weeks. So work has been done already. It's for a while we only had one lane open as we worked on certain sections and phases. Now the entire road is built, and it will be built to withstand heavy equipment and all the materials that may be required to work toward the recovery, the dam, the spill recovery work. And so it should be a long-lasting road. So we appreciate all the efforts of everyone. We should be finished within a couple of weeks. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. Department of Fish and Wildlife, we've worked really, really well with DWR, and they just tremendous effort. You know, they had a huge problem, huge issue up here, but they worked really hard to help us save 9 million fish with virtually no loss whatsoever. So for the state's anglers, which is our concern, it was just a tremendous effort. So a couple of things. Last Monday, a week ago today, we released the first million spring run Chinook salmon, and those are a federal and state threatened species, so a critically important species for the ecology. The next million fish are being tagged, and every one of these fish is going to have a tiny little pit tag in it. So in 3 years, we'll know how successful we were during this incident to get all those fish back up to the Feather River to spawn. The Oroville hatchery, the Feather River hatchery here in Oroville, is a critically important hatchery. They raise more than 50% of the state's fall run Chinook salmon, which is what you go catch. So a tremendous effort by everybody, CAL FIRE and everybody, to save our facility, keep our people safe, and ultimately 9 million fish. So at the moment, there's an additional 4 million fall run Chinook salmon at the Annex hatchery along Highway 99 that are in pretty good shape. And we're continuing to work to release those fish, which we will when they're appropriate size and the water conditions continue to exist. Thank you very much. There's a joint DWR CDFW effort to rescue fish. You've probably seen a lot of media coverage on rescuing fish and doing an assessment of the riverbank. And if there are any fish there, we're going to try to get them out. And that work will continue this week. We're planning it to hope that if there's any fish out there, especially threatened green sturgeon, that's what we're going to work for. One thing, the Feather River hatchery remains closed and closed until further notice. So we ask people to stay away. It may not look like that it's a dangerous situation if you just look, but there's a lot of equipment out, a lot of safety equipment out, fire hoses, things like that. We're trying to save fish. So we ask that people stay out of the Feather River hatchery. So that's all I have. If you have individual questions, I'm happy to stick around and ask them later.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Andrew. So this is the part we'll go to some questions.
Bill, at this point, are you confident that the spillway can be rebuilt, or do you think that you might have to reconstruct a whole new one?
I think that we're confident we're gonna have a spillway by next year. And so whether it's the entire spillway or a portion of the spillway, whether that's this year or next couple years, I think that's yet to be determined. That'll be part of our process that we're going through this week. So we should have a much better idea by Friday or early next week.
Are you bothered by the notion that you might not have a permanent fix done by this fall?
I'm not bothered by that. No.
Do we have a new assessment of cost? I remember February was like 4.7 million a day.
Yeah, I don't have any updates on the costs of that. The costs are being validated and going through and checking for accuracy, as well as being careful about trying to lay out the cost between the response activity, not just for the department, but like for Caltrans or CDFW or other agencies that have been working with us, as well as, you know, the recovery activity, which has, as I said earlier, started. So part of our strategy here in the coming weeks and months, really the rest of the year, is to come and meet with you and, you know, the public and the media to get through the kind of the regular update on the progress, the costs, the challenges and the successes as we move through this process. And so a lot of that information will be developed, and, you know, we're looking at a kind of a 2-week cycle once we get out of this kind of emergency response mode, that we hope to be out of this by the first part of June.
What's the latest dollar estimate you have at this time for rebuilding?
I'm going to go. The latest one I've been told is I'm going to go back to the 100 to 200 million, which was early February, and so again we'll know more about the estimates later this week or early next week.
Are you considering using other materials in this next permit? Like steel pipes other than concrete?
Are we looking to use other types of materials? I'm going to go back to all options have been on the table. I think a lot of you're going to use a lot of concrete, a lot of rebar, And so it just depends on, again, the strategy that they take. There are other materials that have been considered in part of the an evaluation process. You know, steel beams, bridge sections, precast structures, but we'll see what they have to say. I haven't actually seen like the proposed 60% design primary and secondary alternatives yet. We'll learn more about that in the next couple days.
When you finish bringing the main spillway down to zero this evening, is it your expectation that's it for the season? Or do you think you're going to use it again?
No, that's a good question. We fully anticipate to use the spillway again at least once and maybe 2 more times. It comes back to the amount of snow that we still have above this reservoir in the Feather River watershed, how much water we move through the spillway when we activate it again, how much water we want to store behind the reservoir before we actually activate the spillway. So at the moment, our plan is to go back up to 860, 865 through consultation with the Sheriff's Department, our regulatory agencies being our Division of Safety of Dams and our FERC regulatory agencies in consultation with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so all of that, how high we fill the dam up, and then the higher we go, the less probability we'll have to have a second or a third spill. But at the moment, you know, I think we'll start at 860, which is about 20 feet above or 22 feet above where we are today. But we continue to have those conversations as we move through the weather forecasts and the inflow modeling that's occurring basically twice a day. And so these are conversations that our Project Operations Center, through their Emergency Operations Center there in Sacramento, is briefing up our Orville Incident Commander and people here on site to really understand the watershed dynamics and ultimately how much water we have stored behind the dam.
Is there any consideration given to just, this may upset the contractors, but just draining that lake?
Draining the lake.
I don't even,
What's that? Well, drain the lake.
as low as you could possibly go.
Well, we're going to operate this dam for the rest of the year with a lot of input from not just ourselves, the weather forecasts, but our regulatory agencies, our environmental resource agencies. The impact of this dam goes, how we manage our resources flows not only from here in this community, but all the way to the Delta. So this reservoir is part of the engine that maintains freshwater conditions in the Delta. So that's all being factored into the water level for first and primary is public safety here at the reservoir. So part of your question is, you know, how far do we drain it to make sure that we have enough flood storage, whether it's this year, which is be near term, or long term, be at the end of the summer and early fall, to make sure based on the flood control spillway and the emergency spillway and the operation of the Hyatt Powerhouse, how does that all look? And so that will affect, I think, the primary consideration on how high or how low you store water within this lake. That'll be first. And then we go into our regulatory requirements, whether that's dam safety, whether that's environmental, whether it's water supply. Fortunately, the Hyatt Powerhouse was protected by almost superhuman effort to waterproof that plant and keep it operational. And that effort goes on every day to make sure that it's waterproof, that something changes, that we can take on that additional tailwater. We might have to turn it off if we get more tailwater than they want. But again, that's why we're going to start back on dredging to make sure that we clear that channel and we can operate that plant at full capacity. There, go ahead.
What did you mention was going to happen with the emergency spillway? Are you foreseeing that there's any possibility that would resort to using that?
Well, as I've said, you know, Mother Nature has taught us a bunch of lessons every time you think you know what you're doing, Mother Nature gives you a little poke. And so I don't want to mislead the public that if we got into a very difficult situation, we will have to use the spillway. But that's why we've spent millions of dollars to reinforce what we have there and mitigate the erosion concern that we have here. And we've had a lot of amazing technical people debate and come up with our kind of multi-phased approach. And so it's essentially done So if we had to use it, we could use it. Now, do I want to use it? I don't want to use it. I don't think the sheriff wants to see us use it. And the city of Oroville probably doesn't want us to use it. But I don't want to say we're not going to use it, because if something really terrible happened, then it's there for us to use.
Are there ramifications to turning the spillway on and off repeatedly?
Well, we're going to learn a lot today when we turn it off. We've done everything that we can. And when I say we, a number of very talented, very experienced people have gone into helping us install the protective measures that we did before we turned the spillway back on, like the rock bolting, the shotcreting, pulling the slopes back, understanding the dynamics of using the spillway at certain flow regimes, like 40,000 versus 50 versus 20. So all of those things set us up for a really successful use of that spillway for the rest of the year. Now, when we come off the spill today, there's a number of different monitoring teams and cameras that have been set up to collect all of the available information, so we can learn, how the spillway and the geologic structure around it act as we come down to 35, 30, ultimately to 0 within that spillway itself. And then we'll jump back in as soon as it's safe, do those assessments, and if there is corrective actions or protective measures that we need to take, then we're going to do those. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.